Welcome to our show, Conversations. Our show is about historical, current, and emerging social justice issues. We try to bring to you guests who can speak on the inequities that exist in our world currently. Today's show is going to be about finding solutions to these inequities so that we can have a fairer and more just world. Joining me today in our conversations is Ethel Long-Scott, Executive Director of the Women's Economic Agenda Project. To my right, welcome, Ethel.
Nice to be here. Thank you for
Thank you so much. And Pete Woiwide to my left. Welcome, Pete. Thank you so much for taking the time out and coming and sharing your wisdom with us. So welcome both. I have known Ethel for, I believe, since 1982, and have always been amazed at her ability to bring people together and to listen, and for people to listen to the message that the Women's Economic Agenda Project puts out to the entire country. They've been active locally at the state level and at the national level. One of the things that Ethel says about herself is that she pushes, prods, pokes political, economic, and civic establishments on a mission to increase social and economic justice for all. So who you're going to meet is one of my heroes and mentors, and I'm very pleased to bring you Ethel. Ethel, would you share with us a little bit about the Women's Economic Agenda Project and what brought you to this project? What inspired you to start this?
Women's Economic Agenda Project, our acronym is WEAP. You know, we get those interesting acronyms, right? We'll be 30 this year in June. And how the organization came about was actually, a lot of people think I've been there so long that I'm a founder, but I've been there 28 years. What came about when Reagan's first set of cuts, and we didn't understand at that time we were dealing with austerity measures, but in effect we were. But the women understood, and particularly in Oakland and Berkeley, that we needed to do something more than simply fight individually. So women from the Older Women's League, the Black Women Organized for Political Action, a number of leaders at shelter providers, some of our folks who provided some of the safety net that's gone now for our kids that were runaways, women who provided, Carol Brown, who provided job training to very, very poor families, figured that we know there's more strength in numbers. What is happening here is big. Unfortunately, it was a precursor to what we were going to be facing and dealing with now. I had been involved for many years already by then, because I came in as a young woman through the civil rights movement and fighting against really the war in Vietnam. So many of my high school friends were drafted into that war. Different kind of wars that exist now. A lot of urban folk were brought into those wars. But it was a part of my being politicized. That process, I would say, together around the racial aspects and the economic aspects were a part of the formula, if you will, that helped to develop whatever I am now. I would only learn later that my grandmother, who I did not know well, was unfortunately viciously brutalized all of the years of her life, up until the end of her life. And married at 13, as many farm women did, and had no way out. There wasn't any bosses and any weeps and none of those kind of groups around for women at that point. So I think that I've had this interesting journey that I partially didn't pick, and it picked me, but it's made for an interesting and instructive life.
Thank you. Our second guest is Peter Woiwide from the California Partnership, which is a statewide coalition committed to finding solutions to end poverty and bring more justice, not just to the California budget, but to our communities. And when Ethel was talking about financial literacy, I really believe that one of the literacy pieces that we're missing is that we don't understand the state budget. That every year it sort of, shows up and it falls on our heads, and then we have to sort of, try to see if there's any light in it. And this has been going on for a while. So if you could look, if you want to share some personal story, feel free to do that. But if you would look back to where we were and talk a little bit about how we got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the California Partnership is a coalition of anti-poverty groups across the state, including BOSS, Women's Economic Agenda Project, and others. And we try to bring together individuals and organizations from low-income communities, so people with disabilities, seniors, low-income women, parents, etc. And our broad focus is to, as you said, undo the injustice that's been done to our communities. The way that plays out in California, there's a big target on the state budget. And I think you're right, Boona, in saying that our communities don't fully understand how the state budget affects our lives, be it affordable housing or be it access to food and healthcare and things like that, or and education and all of the infrastructure that our communities need to succeed. And I certainly don't think that we as a community understand how we got to where we're at. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. When California is called the Golden State, and that is obviously in reference to finding gold in our streams and waters hundreds of years ago, but it's also in reference to an era where the leaders of the state invested in public structures, invested in education and strong social safety nets so that we could become the sort of shining light of what the United States was supposed to be, and every Californian had a better chance to achieve their dreams, and we could all create a better
and
society
for a little
together.
while we were like that.
Indeed, yeah.
Because I remember that time.
I won't go into the how long I've been around, but I don't remember that time in California. But yeah, indeed, and California was the sort of beacon of the United States. That higher education, fully funded, the cheapest, most quality education in the country. Social services, people could have access to healthcare and food and all of the things that one needs to survive in a community. And then things started to change, and we as a community started to take for granted that bounty, and we started to go about dismantling our public structures. And so,
starting with what, Proposition 13?
Indeed,
and
yeah.
Things, laws and things like that.
Right, yeah. So in 1978, California, which has more propositions on the ballot than other states, they put something on the ballot called Proposition 13. And the goal was the stated goal was to balance out property taxes so homeowners in California weren't going to have to suffer paying more property taxes. Well, what it actually did was froze property taxes, which I'll talk about in a second, and also added a 2/3 requirement to both passing a budget and raising any revenues in the state. So what that means, obviously in most elected bodies, there's less than 2/3 of one party or the other. So in the California state legislature for the last however many years, it has been majority one party of Democrats and minority of another. But the minority party, and over the last 30 years, has gone around, and in order to run for the Republican Party, you have to sign a pledge in the states that say, I will never ever raise taxes on anything ever. And in order to enter the primary system and get the nod of your party, you need to sign that pledge.
Sort of like getting the Republican nomination.
Exactly.
Like.
No, absolutely. And a lot of what has started in California, we're seeing around the country, the sort of anti-government sentiment coming from a certain elite inside the party that is really destroying our public structures. So how that has played out, and when the 2/3 majority rule went into effect, the government no longer was able to raise the appropriate funds to fund things like public education or housing or healthcare or all the things that we depend on. And year by year, the government sort of had to seize and fit and start, and with this just over 2/3 of the elected legislators saying, nope, never going to raise taxes, absolutely not. Just over 1/3, the other 2/3 had to figure out, where are we going to find this money? How are we going to balance the budget? Because states, unlike the federal government, have to balance the budget every single year. The dollar signs at the end have to equal zero. So
I think
started
it's
a campaign.
important for folks to know that Proposition 13 not just affected the state budget,
Right.
but it also affected the counties
Exactly.
that who were also, depending to provide the services that we need on the tax dollars from property taxes.
Right.
You're
You're
it was sort of
absolutely right.
A double whammy.
Exactly, you're absolutely right. It froze the ability of local governments to raise their own taxes. So now counties and cities, which are very dependent on state programs, when those state programs disappear, they're not allowed to raise their own taxes to try and to bring back that money. So we're in a desperate situation now, and we really need to find a way.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I wanted you to share with us is the campaign that started. I don't know whether it started when WEAP opened, but I think it was later. Was the Poor People's Campaign for Social Justice, or
Yes, well,
close?
we got into the Poor People's Human Rights Campaign movement because, frankly, we fought and lost a number of battles around women and welfare rights in the 80s and in the early 90s. We hosted something that you all participated,
yes, we
the
did.
Poor Women's Summit in 1990 at Laney College and Mills College, in anticipation of these god-awful developments, because California, Michigan, Minnesota, and I'm forgetting the other two states that were test states to these god-awful programs that were, quote, changing welfare as we know it. And they were really programs to clobber the families that were the most destitute. The problem being is the people who were in unions were being sold a bill of goods that, well, that's just those people's problem, not yours. And we found we had to get a new strategy of a human rights program that could begin to allow us to frame a strategy forward. An interesting history that you raised there, and it actually very much dovetails with what Peter laid out, but I have one caveat that I think we need to look at when we're thinking about it in California. Part of the results prior to Prop 13 essentially were some big battles around if corporations were going to essentially divest themselves from paying into the public. And I think that we really fought those battles around education. They were integral to our battles around if we could level the playing field, everyone be taxed equally. But as corporations stepped out of the process, that's where we got our eye off that prize. That if the full weight of the tax burden is simply on, quote unquote, those who are working, that really a big thing had been won there. And I think that we kept seeing this process because initially the initiative process was a process to empower and bring in the California population to do what we did not believe that either of the big parties would do. And I think that that's significant. The position of the so-called welfare recipient, Mr. Reagan and a whole host of theoreticians really demonized and lied about the fact that if you were poor, I mean, they were able to advance a lot of very hateful ideology, that if you were poor in this country, you were to blame for your own situation, especially if you were a single mom with children. You were some, bum, good for nothing. And so we found that we were entangled in this defense of the bottom section of the population. It entangled us with precisely these women, and that's a good thing. I mean, to me, it's helped us stay grounded. And for others, it might be, they characterize us as only black. Even though the majority of people that were on public aid were always white, but a part of in this country, right? But a part of the way to sell this idea that there were deserving and undeserving poor. That's when that language began to develop. Was all in these 80s as they were beginning to really what we were seeing, and something we're going to address later in the program, is this restructuring of the economic system from one that was really driven by industry to one that's really being driven by technology.
I believe that that was around the time when, at least also at BOSS, we started to talk about, would our work look different if we looked at it through the lens of human rights? And that did support almost a radical change in the way that we do our work at BOSS. I wanted to ask you, Peter, a question about CalWorks.
Sure.
Because when I was raising a child on welfare, and I can tell you it was in 1971 and 1972 and 73, the system was on my side. luckily, I had a really good social worker also. I went through school. I went through college. I got my master's while on welfare and raising a kid. I was poor, but I wasn't devastated because the cost of things is not what it is now.
Right.
So what is the latest news on CalWORKs? Because we hear so much that's going to be cut. Is there a strong movement towards keeping at least the education piece intact? Because that's one way out for women to get into the work market.
Absolutely, yeah. So CalWORKs is a program, as you talked about, Boona, that is intended to provide a hand up and create a space for people to realize their dreams, get an education, get into the workforce, and overcome some of the economic barriers that are set out in our society. Over the last 6 or 7 years, the program has been attacked time and time again, and as we see budget cuts coming down, the constituencies that are least organized and most vulnerable to these budget cuts are the ones that don't have strong proponents in the Capitol. And as Ethel talked about, there's a systematic program to keep these folks away from the annals of power. So the current proposal that's on the table, after $15 billion over the past 2 years cut away from health and human services programs, the governor has put forward a proposal that would cut $1 billion directly out of CalWORKs. If you include the child care component, it's almost $1.5 billion, which is a staggering amount, just a staggering amount of money. But to think about what the implications of that on the ground for individuals would be, and this is after years of shortening the time. That the time used to be 60 months that someone had the opportunity to go to school, get a degree, or get subsidized work so that they could build into their career. That was shortened to 48 last year. This proposal this year would shorten it, for some cases, to 24 months. And in a lot of cases, that would be retroactive. So if you're a mother and you have been in school for 30 months, about to get your degree, this proposal goes forward, you are instantly cut off of aid. The money that is not only subsidizing your school so that you can get an education and contribute to the workforce, but probably subsidizing your housing, your food for your child. And some of the numbers that we've looked at, if this proposal goes forward unchanged, it would be about 100,000 children put in a position of almost instantaneous homelessness, where they wouldn't know where the next check was going to come from to keep a roof over their heads. So you asked about a movement to push back against this.
Yeah.
Yes. Luckily, there's been some strong leadership in the legislature who has said, in the assembly, they have said, we're not going to stand up for this proposal. Governor Brown, you got to go back and figure something else out because we can't balance the budget on the backs of these people anymore. And we had a great rally in Sacramento on February 29th. And the way that the budget process works, after tax day, the government will figure out how much money it has, and then there will be a short period in the end of May and the beginning of June where we're trying to, again, reinforce to the governor and to the legislators that they can't balance the budget like this on the backs of the poorest Californians. So California Partnership, along with our fellow organizations like yours and others around the state, are pushing to demand the rejection of these cuts from the state Senate and from the governor, and find another way to balance this year's budget, because this is not how it can happen.
California Partnership brings together people from all of our community to get together and speak truth to power. We're going to show you a video of one of these moments.
People showed up today. If you're a parent, say, we are here. We are here. People with disabilities, we are here. We are here. Students, we are here. I would like to bring Maha Ibrahim from Nancy Skinner's office. It's an absolute delight for me to welcome someone from Nancy's office, seeing how I'm from Berkeley and she represented us on the city council and is now doing a great job in the state.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maha Ibrahim. I work right here in the Oakland State Building for Nancy Skinner. She is so, so proud that you guys are still on the streets and you're still going strong. And she wanted me to tell you that everything you do matters. Just a few months ago, you guys fueled the Think Before You Click campaign, and after 3 years of getting it vetoed by Governor Schwarzenegger, of getting it stuck in committee, Nancy was able to pass the e-fairness revenue bill to get the revenues we deserve from out-of-state online retailers. This year she introduced AB 1130 to raise a 1% income bracket on the top 1%. A rate that was in place under Governor Reagan and Wilson, two Republican governors. She calls it the Reagan-Wilson Tax Fairness Act. Today in California, if you make $65,000 a year or you make $5 million a year, you pay the same tax rate, and we know that's not fair.
That's not fair.
We know what's wrong here in California. You know what's wrong. It takes 50% to create a tax loophole, a 50% vote, but it takes a 2/3 vote to raise a revenue, and we know that's wrong.
That's wrong.
Jackie can tell you, each of our offices in this building, we have maybe 5 or 6 staff members, but on the days that you come out and you share your passion and your intelligence and you speak your truth, we feel like we have hundreds, and we get empowered and we can go back and do the job and reintroduce those revenue bills until we get them passed. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'd like to bring to the mic Clarissa Douthard, and if I didn't pronounce that correctly, forgive me, from Parent Leader. She is a parent leader with Parent Voices. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Clarissa Douthard. I am an Oakland resident, a mother of a 4-year-old child. I'm here today with Parent Voices, a parent-run, parent-led grassroots organization fighting to make quality child care accessible and affordable to all families. In June of this year, I lost my child care due to budget cuts. The maximum income allowed for eligibility had been lowered, and the choice to either work and provide for my family or stay home and barely get by was made for me. Unfortunately, after a long struggle towards success and self-sufficiency, I've been forced to start completely from zero. We cannot allow this to happen to other families. We cannot allow this to continue.
No.
I'm here today not only to share my story, but to speak on behalf of the 200,000 families without childcare who desperately need it. To speak on behalf of the thousands of children who will lose the opportunity to learn, and their parents who will lose their jobs because there is no one to care for their children. Limiting access to childcare for working families is not a way to stabilize our economy or create a better California.
No.
It is a step backwards.
It's a leap backwards, actually.
By cutting childcare, everyone loses. We are sending the wrong message when our government provides substantial tax breaks for corporations, yet cannot educate and care for our most vulnerable populations. Yeah. It is time to prioritize supporting the leaders of our future and ensuring that we can keep Californians working. Today, I'm urging our legislators, don't make any more cuts. Please make a commitment to finding ways to raise revenue and fix our budget deficit. Thank you.
Ethel, you have something extremely exciting coming up, which I think our stories, the stories of women and the stories of our kids and stories of kids, youth who have been incarcerated. I mean, there are stories to be told, and I'm just amazed at the level of work that WEAP is doing to get this
Courts of Women.
World Courts of Women on Poverty in the U.S. to come together.
We're all a part of supporting this conference. These women, the Asian Women's Human Rights Council and El Tallier, have kind of run before us. They've addressed the globalization and poverty in 37 other courts in multiple continents all around the world over the past 19 years. And when we looked at that model and they offered us the chance to try and piece together, we're playing a lead agency role here, but how to bring these pieces together, because it isn't one, we're watching the old safety net being destroyed but we need a new social contract.
We really
And so
do.
what they did, we were looking at, well, they've done some of this. How might we learn from these models and borrow? When they're beginning to raise, look, it's not just that people earn less than $2 a day. The reality for billions on our planet and increasingly millions in our country is that they don't even have that amount of earnings. I mean, we're talking about that the pavement is their home. This is crazy.
Sure, yeah, well, I think it's, obviously this event is really exciting, and I think it comes at an amazing moment where this fall, or last fall, the Occupy movement opened a conversation, and now it's our responsibility to walk through that conversation, and ears of the country are listening and grasping for something different. They're looking for what this country should be, the promises that have been bestowed on all Americans and folks around the world that are not coming true. And as you said, Ethel, the role of corporations and the role of the unduly wealthy playing in that they're controlling our government. They're controlling the things that we as citizens or members of this community should own. And so now we've got to walk through it, and we've got to take this responsibility back. And this isn't just the Occupy movement happened and now we're done, back to business as usual. No, this is the starting of recalibrating our society towards a place where everybody has a voice, where everybody can survive and thrive. And I think it's exciting that this event is happening, and I'm looking forward to what it kicks off.
I was supposed to show the flyer.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to make
Please,
sure
yeah.
that if the camera, we have a nice, beautiful poster, but I don't have that with me today. But it highlights. I mean, we're really excited.
I'll hold it up for
about
you while you
this
talk.
event happening in our city of Oakland, but it's really for the whole Western region. And I really see it as a continuation. The Occupy movement was a continuation of Dr. King's work. He challenged this complacent nation, and that we needed to begin to shift and raising the notion of not just abolishment of poverty, which is a huge part, but then how do we fund it? Well, the bankers didn't have to go, have a baker's sale. They went and nationalized things. We may have to look at how do we nationalize things so that we have education that's free from kindergarten to the higher level, so these kids aren't $50,000, $60,000 in debt.
Right.
I mean, really, it's a debtor's prison, because you got to take, if you can, whatever job that might be available.
So, I already knew that it was illegal for her to do it. We were under rent control in Berkeley, and that's where I was living. And we went to court, and she had to pay me to move. But I wanted to move anyway because I had been there 8 years, but the last couple of years I was diagnosed with rheumatism arthritis, and the building was so old. I was staying on the 3rd flight of stairs where I couldn't go up and down the stairs, but I didn't have money to move. So I settled for a little bit of money just to move where I could get into another place. But I knew I was eligible for emergency housing with a 14-year-old son in school. I was disabled, plus a senior, 55. And I thought that I would be able to get housing quicker. And I said when I came out, I had been paying my whole Social Security check, which is $822, and the rent was $750, which left me nothing of my money. So I thought I was going to come out and get emergency housing quick. But I've been stuck out here for almost a year now, where I found when I came out, I started staying in hotels, waiting on the programs to call, and I joined all the programs like Center Independent Living, the Women's Drop-In, the Berkeley Drop-In, just different organizations, started going to all the housing meetings, and found myself stuck out here because it's hard to get a shelter with a boy that's 14, because they usually stop at 11 or 12, and that was the difficult part. So when God gave me money, he said, buy me a little automobile from $700 to $800, And so when I got to the car, I guess God knows best. I didn't know it was going to be my shelter, my storage place, my housing for me and my son. I had to eat in my car. My son went without baths and had to go to school for 7 months because we couldn't get into no shelter. And all the waiting lists are so long, and I'm still here even almost 12 months later.
You know, I think that as we've been talking, I'm reminded that one of the things that happened with Dr. King, you know, he really grew as a leader. He started on the journey to, of course, destroy the impact of really an apartheid system of segregation, violence, and tyranny. But in that process, he also grew as a leader. He grew to understand that a person having the right to be in a restaurant but not having the funds in their pocket to purchase that hamburger, that reflected another kind of inequity and injustice. And he grew into a human rights advocate, an economic justice advocate. And so there's often when we celebrate his life, and of course, come April 4th, we're gonna be remembering when he was assassinated, we don't focus as much that Dr. King in his later life really directed himself to the notion of building a broad poor people's movement that would transform our country, that would occupy our nation's capital until the issues of justice and these kinds of justice would in fact continue. So a part of the Poor People's Human Rights Campaign was not only to elevate the international standards, because our Constitution doesn't necessarily address that we have to have economic security, but to also raise that we, the people, need to be a part of being that transformation. So when you think about it, we're actually looking at we're living through a huge transformation, Boona, where we're, from the past 20th century, it was really labor-driven production, and now we're in the 21st century where it's technology-driven production that is replacing human beings in the workplace. Wow, big thing. This isn't just a recession. This isn't just stagnation. This is, and the big people in Wall Street, they kind of know that.
Yeah.
So they come to us and say, nationalize the banks so that we can be paid, you the public, and we're going to pretend that there's scarcity in your states. We're going to pretend that there's no money in the 8th largest economy on the planet when we talk about the state of California. So somebody's got money. It's just that we workers don't have it. So we need this transformative movement in the way that Dr. King spoke of. And I think that's the other part. It's the stories so that we begin to broaden our vision, because without a vision, we perish as a people. So
it really is.
I mean, when you think of the enormity of it. So I think the question is, how do we begin to forge that new social contract? And I think that means getting these corporations out of the business of running our government at our expense. And I think that's the hard part, because people kind of think that they're playing a more passive role than they actually are, but until Wisconsin jumps out.
Right.
We found that when we were dealing with it as parents on welfare. I mean, that there were these large corporations that were privatizing. It wasn't that when they said change welfare as we know it, they meant make it corporate. They didn't mean, they had a whole different other kind of code.
Yeah, bust the unions at the same time.
There you go. And make workfare, which in the public sector and all of those things, which of course undermines workers' basic rights.
Since the Great Depression. There is no time limit on poverty. You know, how is our state legislature going to time families off in the middle of the worst recession we've had in nearly 100 years? getting their health care while we're sitting here trying to knit together raggedy ends that don't meet because we're not getting our fair share. I am a middle-class mom now. I was on welfare for 10 years. I got off welfare because I was able to get my education, and I got off welfare right as they passed welfare reform and put time limits on parents instead of putting a time limit on poverty. And I want to know, why the hell do I pay more in income taxes than General Electric? General Electric made $14 billion in profits last year and didn't pay a dime in taxes. And I'm a middle-class mom, and I pay 3 times more in taxes now than I used to make working full-time cleaning houses in San Francisco for $4.75 an hour. This shit makes me mad. Because let me tell you something, when I was on welfare in 1989 and I enrolled at City College of San Francisco, my grant was more then than it is today. Right? My grant was more in 1989 than the grant for a single mom and her child is today. And in 1989, milk cost $1 a gallon, y'all. And that gallon of milk costs $4 to $5 today.
Yes, that's right, that's right.
You know, and when you hear them bitching about, oh, our CalWORK grants are so bent, they're so generous, well, what are we comparing ourselves to? The state of Texas, the average welfare grant in the state of Texas is $68 damn a month. $68 a month. So that's how low these legislators can go if we're not up in their face, up in their offices, calling their damn phones and giving them hell for making decisions that put children in the line of fire for these budget cuts and don't hold these corporations accountable for paying their damn fair share. Right, so when you hear these state legislators complain about our program and that 30% of families on welfare in the entire country live in California alone, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. Because as bad as these cuts are and these time limits are, at least our state still has a damn safety net. And we need to make sure they don't shred that safety net with any more cuts to CalWORK, to SSI, to Medicaid, to child care. We need to get up in their faces, and I'm willing to go to jail. I have never been to jail for anything positive. That was my past. But I'm ready to go to jail for my principles now because my daughter's old enough that she won't get taken by CPS if I get arrested and have to spend the night in jail. Are you guys with me? Are you with me? Are you with me?
We have 2 very important events coming up, one in April and one in May. Peter, would you please share with the audience what's going to be happening in Sacramento in April?
Sure. So California Partnership, and on April 23rd and 24th is going to be bringing up leaders from all across the state to take hold of what's happening in our budget process, bring leaders from our communities, and go to the Capitol and train our leaders on how the budget process works, how to advocate for change with their legislators, and then we're going to go and do it. We're going to go meet face-to-face with legislators and tell them we demand that this budget reflects the needs of our communities. We need revenues. We need a stronger state social safety net and stronger pieces of our community to be supported by what our government should be doing for them. So April 23rd and 24th in Sacramento.
Growing up in East Oakland, my mother had me at a relative age. She was 14. Then I was the oldest out of 6 kids, so it wasn't too much to go around. And the only good influences I had were the people running the streets, because they had all the flashy cars, the money, the good clothes. So it was a hard decision to stay in school when I could have been making more money on the streets. So like most of my peers, I chose the fast way to end up in a bad situation. Poverty to me is not really necessary material things, it's a state of mind. Because you can have a lot of money and still be poor with no friends, no family, no love, care. So to me, poverty is something that, you put yourself in. Solutions to poverty are, first, getting respect, putting dignity back into people. Because we lost respect for ourselves. We do anything for $1. We'll say anything to each other. We don't respect our elders. Then they taking away all the fun. They trying to close down from what I hear, Fairyland, Nolan Park. They took all the recreation, all the malls and stuff out of Oakland. So it's hard for us to be positive when there's nothing here but negativity. I say, first of all, before anybody can help themselves, help anybody else, they got to help themselves. So if we are in Oakland, you should try to fix the problems in Oakland first. Then we should be able to branch out to help everybody. Because I see that just because they say Africa, Asia, and all these places don't have, you have people right here in our own community that don't have. You have kids that's not eating properly. You have people that's sleeping out in the cold. To whereas, it's sad when all this money is being made and people are still in the same predicament we was years ago.
Peter, what are you expecting will come out of the April gathering?
Well, I think, first of all, we're excited to announce that there is a ballot initiative that's going to be coming forward with our California Partnership support that's going to be raising taxes on the wealthiest, putting that money towards health and human services programs as well as education. So you see folks with blue and yellow clipboards, please sign these. And
be careful though, because there's usually like 4 people with different clipboards, so you have to sort of...
But more to the point about what we're hoping to gather in April and beyond. I think Ethel spoke to it well, that we're in a moment where we have to rethink what our society needs to look like. It's no longer just, I am against X and let's stop Y from happening. We got to start talking about how we're going to build this together. And so that doesn't mean that we take our hand off the pulse of the state budget. Doesn't mean that we take our hand off the pulse of making corporations get out of our government. But we got to do both. We got to disentangle ourselves from the forces that take our communities away from power, and we also have to talk about what we're creating together. So, hoping we're going to start that conversation in April.
Do you have a few last words?
Well, I thank you, and I can't say enough the importance of folks like Boss and yourself and the leadership you've provided for saying, we have a right to exist. Many of the things that have been criminalized against society started against the poor. And Boss has been a place where you not only challenge that, but you've tried to bring together leaders to learn forward. So I think we're at an interesting juncture, and I thank you both for your work. I just think we have a lot to do.
We do have a lot to do. On that note, I want to remind you that you also have a lot to do. So join us both in Sacramento on April 23rd and 24th, and in Oakland, May 10th, 11th, and 12th.
And the 13th.
And the 13th. Thank you very much. We'll be back in a month.